and welcome once again to 25 o'clock. I'm your host, Dan Drago. Glad you're here. Glad you could make it. Got a great show this week. On the show this week, this episode, episode 42, I think we're up to right now, I have incredibly talented photographer. She's a band manager. She books shows. She does all kinds of cool stuff in the Philadelphia music community. Her name is Carolyn Lederach. And Carolyn Lederach. It's that second one. I don't think it's that first one. Carolyn Lederach. An amazingly talented behind-the-scenes person here in the Philadelphia music scene. And I think those people need to get championed more often. It's not as glamorous as being in a band, of course. We all know that, and we definitely talk about that a little bit. But I was very pleased to have her on the show. She came highly, highly recommended from a lot of other musical people whose opinions I trust very much. We're going to talk more about Carolyn in just a minute. But in the meantime, have you been to 25o'clockpod.com? That's the worldwide website address, home base, dwelling spot of the podcast on the internet, 25o'clockpod.com. What can you do there? You can go through the archive. All the episodes are up there from episode 1 up to this episode, 42. They're all there at 25o'clockpod.com. You can go to the Friends and Neighbors page. That's where I have links to anyone and everyone who's ever been on the show, had anything to do with the show. You can get more information about them right there. You can join the mailing list. That's cool. I send a mailer out every couple of weeks. Maybe you got the one this week. I hope you did. I hope it was good. I haven't written it yet, so here's hoping it was good. You can do all that at 25o'clockpod.com. And as I mentioned last time in the show, from a back-end standpoint, I've moved hosting sites, so all the episodes are available up on the archive now. Before, I was having to take some of the earlier ones down because I was running out of room. That's not a concern anymore. I got as much room as I want now. So I've moved. Another little bit of house cleaning right here. If you were subscribed to the show through iTunes or through some other service, me changing the back end may mean that you need to go in and resubscribe. It should take you literally 2 seconds in whatever service that you use to get the podcast, which of course I incredibly appreciate that you would, take it upon yourself, not just to listen to the show whenever, but to actually subscribe so that you're kept up to date with every time there's a new episode. You find us on iTunes, Google Play, all the other various podcast aggregate sites. Review us on iTunes, sure. I know that's something that people ask other people to do for their podcasts. It's nothing I've ever really thought of before, but since I was updating all the information online, I thought, hey, maybe people could review the podcast on iTunes if that's a thing you feel like doing. Like I said, too, we're on Google Play and all the other aggregates out there. And of course, 25o'clockpod.com. Yeah, that's all I have to say about my little website enclave. Other news with 25 o'clock. I have an article up on Brookladelphia, brookladelphiamusic.com. That's a online music blog website that pairs excellent talent in Brooklyn, New York City area with excellent talent here in Philadelphia. And I've had people on the show who reside and hail from both places. So it was great to, I wrote an article for them about a show here in Philadelphia, took some pictures. They're pretty good pictures, considering I have no photographic training of any kind. I thought I did pretty good. You can check it out, though, brookladelphiamusic.com. Also, an older episode of the podcast is going to go up on Radio Nowhere next week, I think. This week, possibly this week. I don't know. Go to radionowhere903.com. I do that through Brookladelphia as well. Just another way of getting the podcast out there. So, you know what? Go to the website. Go to the Friends and Neighbors page. Check me out on Twitter. Check me out on Facebook. I post about this stuff all the time. That's enough about me and my many hiding spots on the internet. Let's talk about Carolyn Lederach real quick here before we get into the conversation. As I said before, she's a photographer, she's a band manager, she's a booker. She works with SoFar Philly, and if you don't know what the SoFar concert series is, it's national, it's international, it's in Europe and in the U.S. We talk about it in the conversation. It's essentially a organized ring of house shows and alternate venue shows and DIY space shows and things like that. Go to sofarsounds.com and you can click on your city. all kinds of cities are involved. Philadelphia, New York City, all the major cities, and even some smaller cities too. My hometown of Rochester, New York is part of the SoFar Sounds network. So go to sofarsounds.com. And for those of you in the Philadelphia area, there are SoFar shows coming up on May 21st and May 28th. You don't get to know who's playing. All you get to know is where and when, and you show up and you get surprised with a truly unique concert experience. We talk about that in way more depth coming up in just a second. And then how do you kind of keep up with stuff about Carolyn if you're interested? She's on Twitter at CLED1024. I'm going to put her up on the Friends and Neighbors page. And her band management company, Blue Stock Agency, at Blue Stock Agency on Twitter, and they have a Facebook and all that. But she's really cool. What she does is really cool, and I think it's really important to highlight these scene supporters. And I don't want to use the term I don't even want to use the term scene supporter because it makes it sound less than, and that's not at all what it is. There would not be music scenes, not just in Philadelphia, but in any city, without people like Carolyn who aren't musicians, who don't play, who aren't performers, but have the same amount of drive and the same amount of passion for music and art as the people actually engaged in making the music and art. And you absolutely need these people in a scene. You couldn't have a thriving scene without them, so it was great to talk to her. And that's the intro I'm going to give her right there. Let's go right now to my conversation with Carolyn Lederach here on 25 o'clock. It's so hard. It's so hard to even get on the road in general, much less to bring anyone besides the band, like anyone useful besides the band, to do the thing. So I think that's great that you're just going out and taking pictures.
Yeah,
have you ever gone out on the road like with a band to that capacity before?
I haven't done photography stuff, but I went with Toy Soldiers a couple years ago for like a little like Nashville run, basically. Mm-hmm. So,
what did you do with them? Like,
I was kind of just doing merch stuff and just kind of tagging along, I guess. But
yeah, how did you get sort of hooked up in the idea of? Because I mean, it's one thing to come to the music world as a player. I mean, that's how a lot of people come to it. Like they're young and then eventually put together a band and they start playing shows. But it's another thing to come to it from the also equally important sort of support or like background, like logistics aspect of a touring band. So like, what drew you to that in the first place?
I've kind of been doing freelance PR and management kind of stuff too. So I've kind of dabbled in just like a different kind of trying to get my hands on like everything to outside of playing, since I don't play anything.
Yeah.
But
the draw for a lot of people, at least from a playing standpoint, is, you hear a band, you hear music when you're young, and then you're just like, hey, I want to do that. You obviously heard bands and music when you were younger. So it's one thing to say, I want to be that. And there's another thing that's to say, I want to help that be. So like, I'm just curious what your trajectory was to kind of be from like a fan, because I mean, all of us kind of start as fans, to want to get more involved and to get involved in the part that's, significantly less glamorous on the surface.
I know, it's an interesting question. I guess it's kind of like, I've just been a huge fan of music kind of from the beginning, really, but high school kind of like peaked, and then I'd just like find really obscure bands and stuff, and then I'd tell everyone about them, and it just kind of continued in that direction. I guess that people just kind of like dig everything that I usually send them, and then it's just kind of panned out from there. But
where are you from? Where did you go to school? Where do you come from?
I'm from like the suburbs of Philly, so out near like Lansdale, Harleysville area.
It's a lot of people. I meet a lot of people who get involved in the Philly music scene who didn't really come from that far away. A lot of people came from like either just over the bridge in Jersey or up in the northern suburbs, out in the west or something like that. So like when you were younger, did the city kind of figure into your formation? Were you like coming into the city for shows and things like that?
Pretty much, yeah. I still live out there, so it's still a lot of back and forth, but it's not as bad as it could be.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. No, it's tougher to get in the city now than it used to be.
Yeah, definitely. 76 is just so great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just like getting a place too and all that, and like the affordability of the city is definitely slowly shrinking away. You can still do it, but I mean, I came to the city 2004.
Okay.
And it was a very different city then. When did you first start coming to the city to see shows? Like what? Like do you remember some of the first shows you ever saw in Philadelphia?
I guess it kind of started when in college, still when I was here for a little bit before I went away to school. Trying to remember kind of some of the first things I went to was kind of just stadium shows like I don't know, like Coldplay and Tom Petty were like ones that I remember. Green Day was like my first concert that I ever went to. That one was in like high school. And then
it's so funny. That's for people my age too. That's probably some of their first concerts too. So, so it's just funny that like for a band like Green Day, for them to have been around for that long to kind of to sort of like hit the generation or not even just hit the age group gap again, where it's like I guess you're always having teenagers have Green Day be their first show, but I feel like it's been happening for it's been happening like 20 years.
Yeah.
And at some point,
it's interesting.
Yeah. At some point, like I mean, you always hear the thing of like parents taking their kids to see like bands that they saw when they were teenagers or in college too. I guess it's going to happen to all of us.
Yeah.
At some point or another.
True.
And then where'd you go to? Where'd you end up going to school?
Penn State.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And what was your deal there?
I went for advertising, so then I guess I kind of panned out of there just doing like music marketing kind of stuff or wanting to do that. So
what is a program like that even like? I mean, that kind of stuff wasn't around really when I went to college, or if it was just starting to form. You had, like management majors and like marketing majors, stuff like that. But like for places to really start specializing in more like musical management. I mean, Drexel does that too, if I'm not mistaken. They've got a pretty decent music management program. I guess what all comes back to is like, what was it in there that you were like, that I want to get into that? I mean, besides the music, obviously you were a fan, but there's always a line between being a fan and being like, I want to make this every day.
Yeah. I guess I went just for strictly advertising, like in the communications college when I went, but then I still kind of wanted my extracurricular things, I guess, to kind of involve music. So I got involved with like student programming stuff.
Like the people that like bring in the bands.
Yeah.
Like that. Oh, that's cool.
So I booked like a monthly, like the noontime concert series thing.
Oh, cool.
So,
like just like college artists, local acts, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was pretty much everyone within like a reasonable driving distance. So it's
cool,
Pittsburgh, cool. Philly, some New York.
So you were kind of bringing in like people kind of coming through on tour and stuff like that.
Yeah, there was some of that. Yeah.
Do you remember any of the groups that you brought in? Anyone notable?
It's actually where I first met the Lawsuits, was way back then, because they were kind of starting out too, and that was like one of the first like Philly bands I really had there, which was exciting, and we've just kind of stayed in touch since then. So
yeah, no, they're a phenomenal band. I've had the great opportunity to see them a few times, and they've opened.
Yeah, they're great.
Friends of mine have opened for them, and they've opened for friends and stuff like that. It seemed like they went away for a little bit, and then they came back. So
yeah,
I'm very happy to see them back again. I saw them at the North. I think last time I saw them was at the North Star, but that was at least 3.5 years ago.
Yeah, it was probably a while ago.
Yeah. No, that's great. So you meet the Lawsuits, and then what sort of drove you to come back? I mean, obviously you're from here, but to come back and like really get involved in this city.
I kind of came back and was trying to get more involved in music after I graduated. Since jobs weren't really panning out anywhere else, I kind of like tried to make opportunities for myself where I could, which is kind of like when SoFar and Communion came into play at the same time once I came back. But it's just, I really love the music scene here, and everyone's super supportive, obviously, of each other. So it really helps.
When did you? So like, let's talk years here. Like, when did you first? What year did you really start getting involved here in the scene in Philadelphia?
I came back around like 2011. So 2011, 2012 was kind of when I really started getting my feet in everywhere. So
yeah, and that was like, at least from my perspective, and everyone's got a different perspective depending on when they came in, but that to me was like sort of the apex of like things really kicking. Like Johnny Brennan's been kicking around for had been kicking around as a good room for a few years at that point. Royal Cafe had really been kicking around for a while. Like we were starting to become much more, not just a music city. Every city's got music, but we were becoming much more of a live music city.
Yeah.
And house shows seemed to be more things. It seemed like around that time, and probably a couple years before that, the epicenter of music used to be either in Center City or down towards South Street, kind of moved up towards Fishtown.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where all that's where all like cool or not cool is all a value judgment right there. But that's where all the new stuff was happening. At least to me, where all the interesting stuff was happening.
Yeah. That surge kind of started then.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was your, like when you were a kid, like what were you into, like music wise? Like even as like a young person, like was there music in the house? Your family, like a musical family, or like played a lot of music?
Yeah, my parents were into a lot of different things, which I think definitely kind of helped span like different musical interests. So my dad's like a huge Beatles fan. And then they'd also play stuff like Jimmy Buffett and like other like, or back when like country music was still decent, my mom was really into like Garth Brooks and stuff. And
oh wow, yeah, no, that was
so it's like a strange span. Like my dad's also really into like Paul Simon, so it's like a lot of.
You had like the classics, you had like the greats, like
yeah,
sort of that canon of 70s, 80s type of music.
Definitely,
right there. Was there anything like when you were a kid that you like really remember being really resonant for you, at least from a musical standpoint?
I think definitely, I forget when I got into Tom Petty, but I think that was kind of
so that's like one of your guys right there. Like Tom Petty's a big, no, he was big for me too. My dad still is a big Tom Petty fan.
I just love the songwriting and everything.
Yeah.
And he's one of the rare like musicians I still watch like biographies and kind of stuff on. So
yeah, he seemed, and he's a guy too that like as time has gone on and you've watched him sort of grapple with the business, he's definitely a guy he definitely walks it like he talks it too. I've always, whether or not I'm not necessarily into like newer stuff he does or doesn't do, like I still will always give him huge props for being like, he basically told all the record companies to shove it in the 80s, and no one,
that was the great thing.
But nobody told the record companies to shove it in the 80s. Like that was like, you almost like were signing your own death warrant right there in terms of just never working, like never being able to like work at a successful level again. But he was just like, no, I'm not going to play that way.
Yeah. I'm going to do this my way.
yeah. And with radio too, like it is the way that he dealt with radio and the way that things were happening then. And a lot of artists can get big and just go along to get along.
Yeah.
So it's good to see guys like that. Even nowadays, he's still doing it, who just kind of say like, no, we're not doing it that way. It's something to have like been an artist at the level that he is for like 40 years.
Yeah.
More.
Like that, yeah.
And then to be like, you know what? I'm going to get back together my first band. And these guys are probably all like, I don't think a lot of them went on into music. I think some of them ended up in the Heartbreakers, but
yeah, I think his keys player,
Ben Mont.
Yeah.
I love it. He's such a signature organ player. Like when you hear like a Ben Mont organ line, you're just like, this is Tom Petty. It's not necessarily like super like virtuosic or anything, but like when you hear a Tom Petty organ line, like you can't not know that that's there. So that's cool. So Tom Petty was one of your guys. Who else were your guys or girls back then?
I guess another like big game changer for me was kind of Arctic Monkeys. Also like later in high school when that first album came out, like 2005, 2006, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
That was just like Alex Turner's like one of my favorite lyricists, I think. And
well, I saw posted all over your Twitter. You got to shoot him.
I did
last night, right?
Yes.
In not the Arctic Monkeys, but that other
Last Shadow Puppets.
Shadow Puppets, and that was cool. That was a good show.
Yeah, it was cool.
Did you get to meet him?
No, I didn't.
Was that because it wasn't possible, or because you just didn't? You were.
I was supposed to do portraits with them, and then I guess their schedule just got changed, which often happens. Obviously, I think it was the first show of the tour too, so obviously things get messed up. But
yeah,
maybe one day.
How do you even like get a gig like shooting a band like that?
It's all just I reach out to PR. I write for a couple different blogs and do photos, so it's all just kind of reaching out to PR and hoping there's spots, and then showing up
with a camera and putting them on the blogs that you say you're going to put them on.
Yes, exactly. Signing the releases.
That's a whole aspect of the music world that I don't have a ton of experience with, like, so like how, like, sort of step by step. I mean, you get in touch with a PR company, you say, I write for this blog or that blog, or I write for this magazine or whatever, and I want to cover / shoot your show. And then, I mean, do they ask for, I mean, what happens from there? Like, do they ask for credentials? Do you like somehow have to like prove that that you are who you say you are?
Yeah, I usually do like a link to my website, I guess, and the site that I say I'm shooting for. It really depends, I guess, how big they are too.
Yeah.
Sometimes they want bigger details like website traffic and all that.
Yeah.
But
And some bands are just so overjoyed that anyone is coming to cover them at all.
Exactly.
No, that's really, it's like I said, it's a whole aspect of the business, because I mean I played and toured for a while, and I knew how hard it was to get people to, like, you know, because we would pitch to outlets as much as you know. I think it was like a 90-10 split. I think 90% of the time we were pitching to other people to come cover the show, and then like maybe one in 10 times, like someone said, like, I'll cover your show. We're just like, sure. And then they spell everything wrong and get it wrong, and you roll your eyes. It happened with college papers a lot too. Like, not to knock on college papers, but there was a time where I was just like, I appreciate the press, I really do, but
sometimes it's just that lack of research. I think. Well, that's still a huge thing.
I think that's still a thing on blogs too, to this, because a blog in itself is almost beholden to no one except the person making the blog. And obviously some people get way more into the quality control of it. Yeah. And some people just like the idea. It's in the same way of, like, some people just want to say they're in a band, and it doesn't really matter if the band's good or not, if anyone cares. Yeah. Some people want to say they have a music blog. To, you know, get in shows, or at least just be like, hey, I have a music blog, I'm involved in the scene. I don't imagine that is where you fall at all. But a lot of, just with the rush for content and the fact that anyone can kind of do it now, or anyone has access to the music.
It's easy to throw it together, I guess.
Throw some national record reviews on there. Review a couple shows that you were going to go to anyway, and then be like, look, I have a music blog.
Then you got to question if it was really worth it when you're getting like a paragraph or something tiny that's half the information's wrong, or spelled wrong, or something.
Or
like
even
that.
to write about national acts, like, as at some point to have a blog or anything, podcast, website, whatever, where you want to focus more on stuff that's happening around you, because, you know, anyone, like, you know, Rolling Stone writes about Tom Petty. Like, you and I would not cover Tom Petty. We would probably not be granted that access. So instead, you want to go on and find a band like the Lawsuits or Former Bell, or any of these bands who are more accessible from a local level, who are who, at least, I mean, you and I both agree, are just as good as any of these huger bands, if not better. And then be able to sort of like stake your claim in a niche right there. Is that kind of what you're going with? Especially because you manage artists, you write about artists, you're going for Philly artists on purpose.
There's definitely, obviously, a lot of good things going on here, so that helps. And it's convenient, obviously, being here in a lot of senses. So
when well, let's talk about SoFar a little bit, because it's a really, really cool thing that only the last couple of years did I really know what it was. I don't want to sound old, but like I reached a point where, like, anything new that was happening, either show-wise or anything, I would just not roll my eyes, but I would just be like, there's no way those people would want anything to do with us at that point. Because I mean, when I left my band, we were all in our early 30s, like 31, 32. And I got to even to a point at that point when Johnny Brenner's was blowing up and that whole Fishtown thing was blowing up. Like, I kind of looked around at that, and I always felt like they don't want anything to do with us. Like, we were like kind of a roots rock, country-ish type band, which I look back now and realize that, like, all that was not true. Like, we very well could have approached any of these people. We felt slightly out of place, because a lot of you guys up there were just doing really, really cool stuff, and we were just kind of looking at that and being like, I don't know if we can compete with that. I lost my point. SoFar. So when I first heard about that, I was like, from just what it was explained to me as, it just sounded way more interesting than going to see bands in a club.
Right. Yeah.
And I was tired of seeing bands in a club, and I was tired of being a band in a club too, especially that second one.
Yeah.
What do you find? I mean, are you finding with SoFar that, like, people are really people are what's the word I wanted? Are connecting with with bands a lot better than they would in a club.
Right. That's kind of definitely the ethos, I guess, that kind of started it all off. They started in London back in like 2009, and it's just kind of spread all over. It's in like 200 cities. We have like leaders in now, which is kind of crazy. Philly was kind of one of the first 10 cities to start up with the SoFar game. Yeah, it was definitely both as a club goer and a musician that got involved starting it up, with equal frustrations of people talking over the music, obviously, catching up with people instead of listening.
Yeah.
And
what's the problem with having a show in a bar?
Yeah.
But it seems, I mean, it's kind of a two-way street right there. Bars seem to be the places that we're going to put on shows to begin with.
Right.
But then you have to go to a show in a bar.
Yeah.
Or you have to go to an arena or something like that. And so, I mean, another great thing about this city is that we're kind of building more of these sort of middle ground venues that are both. But when you guys were first getting, were you kind of with SoFar at the beginning of its inception in Philadelphia, or did you come along a little later?
Yeah, it was myself and Ken Winnig. We both kind of got started up with it at the same time. So I've been from it since the beginning.
When was the beginning?
Our first show was November 11th, 2011. So
okay.
11/11/11.
Yeah. There we go. That's lucky or not lucky.
Yeah. I'm not sure. It's still going.
Who was the first band that you guys hit on?
Lawsuits were actually in our first show, and Peasant, another UK artist, Alessi's Arc. I think that was everyone.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm not missing out on anyone.
We can always go back into the world of the internet.
Archive.
Into the world of the internet and find out.
Yes.
And so what were you finding, like, people, like, what kind of people come to these shows? I mean, obviously it's not the same kind of people who come just to regular bar shows or come to regular club shows, which is not to say that everyone isn't welcome at a SoFar show.
Yeah.
But.
I guess we were kind of nervous at the beginning, like who all would be showing up.
Or if anyone would show up.
Mostly that.
It's comforting for bands to know that on both sides, the people, especially putting on unique shows like that, the people putting the show together are just as invested in it as the bands are, because the bands obviously want people to see them, and then the people who put it together obviously want people to come so that you can do it again.
Yeah.
So what was it like that first night? Like what ended up happening?
I think we mostly lucked out. We got a good space with who was our MC at the time, Victor Gennaro. It was at his place, so he invited a lot of people, and I guess like all of us who were involved just kind of ended up inviting like a handful of people, so we had a pretty good crowd. And then it's just kind of from there, it's just kind of stemmed from word of mouth, which like I still find fascinating that majority of the people that are there because a friend told them or a friend brought them before.
That's cool.
Which is like really cool.
That's the old way. I mean, that's the older style of like DIY tours and bands and independent labels and stuff like that, is that there's this almost, I don't use the word underground network, because like with the internet there's nothing underground anymore. It's all above ground, well above ground. But it's that old DIY spirit right there of just people telling people, because that's, you can read an ad or someone, and everything you do now is an ad being forced at you. But to hear it from someone, to hear it from like an actual human being, it definitely carries a lot more weight.
Definitely, yeah. And I guess there's the whole aspect too that we don't really say who's playing the shows, so no one knows until they show up.
That's very cool.
So you never know.
Yeah.
If it could be someone huge, like Bastile's played a couple. Carano's been
cool
at like New York and stuff. So
that's a really cool aspect of SoFar right there, is that you don't know who's playing, and it's not. There's like a little bit of a wall put in there, not an inaccessible wall at all. Yesterday I just clicked in right there and boom, I'm on the list. You guys will tell me when things are happening.
Yeah.
But it's not like you guys don't you guys don't take out ads like in the weeklies. You don't like advertise the shows on Facebook. You just, if you're plugged into SoFar, which again is not it takes literally 2 seconds.
Yeah.
To just put your email into the thing, and then you have access to this sort of exclusive range of shows right
Yeah.
there. But I think it's really cool that nobody knows who's going to play, and then they just show up.
Yeah.
I guess people are more inclined to dig on the experience. It's less about a name thing. It's less about a scene thing. And it's more about just, you want to go and you want to have a unique concert experience.
Yeah, it's definitely that. Yeah, a lot of people kind of come out having like a new favorite band, and I guess it helps that we have a lot of locals on, obviously.
Yeah.
So that gets people good free press kind of.
Yeah. Do you have, like, it's a pretty even split? You got people from the area, you've got touring people coming through, and
Yeah, we have like 3 or 4 acts on each show. So it's kind of, we have, every once in a while we have international acts, and usually I try to get at least one like touring act on each show. So we usually luck out with someone.
Who are some of the ones you've had lately that you've really dug on? Not to make you pick favorites or anything like that.
Loaded question.
No, I mean, you know.
I guess it backtracks like a couple years, but one of like the standout ones for me, we had a UK band called Little Comets. We got them to play like an afternoon show before their show at North Star Bar. But that was like, aside from it being, I think it was in July, so it was like 100 degrees, but we were all dying in that room. But it's just kind of one of those things where the room was just like dead silent, and they have really like poignant lyrics as well. So you just like hear some of these people whisper like, wow, like in between songs and stuff. And it's just like really cool.
Yeah. You had like a room of people actually paying attention to bands, which seems less and less. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Like, we obviously encourage people to kind of keep quiet and listen. Yeah. But I guess it's kind of also just that almost awkward experience in a way where you like know you're sitting there and someone's playing, and if you talk at all, it's probably going to pick up, and then people are going to be like, shh.
Are these usually like acoustic shows, or like not terribly loudly amplified shows?
Yeah, for the most part, it's acoustic or just stripped down. So that obviously is a contributing factor too. But. Yeah.
And generally, I mean, the people who come onto these shows are appreciators. Really, they're not just there to like. I don't know. I mean, and I don't know if you feel this, and we can definitely talk. We can definitely diverge and talk about this. Yeah. But as music becomes more accessible and free, really, to a point, the value of it seems to decrease, or people place a lower value on it. It's either more expected, or, you know, when it is happening, people tend to think like, oh, well, why I don't have to do anything for this. It's just boom, it's here. It's either on my phone or it's happening in front of me, and I don't see the difference. There are people, honestly, who think like that. I think that's sad, and I feel bad for those people. But I'm just curious. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, especially for you being younger, and you guys kind of coming up in a world where this has kind of always been the case. And now, obviously, you guys still go to people still go to record stores. Like, people still go to independent clubs and things like that. But it's becoming less and less the norm.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I'm still, I guess, one of the rare people that buys CDs and albums still. So I think I like having that physical thing in my hand and being able to see like the artwork and everything involved in it. But I guess there was that thing I read too about like the vinyl sale increase, which I thought was interesting too. But I don't know, I guess like at our shows, at least, having the artist like in such an accessible state too, people tend to also sell a lot. Yeah. Well, I mean, because they get to meet the person that made the record, and they got to see a show where they were, you know, maybe like 2 feet from them, like with their nose like practically to their instrument. But in a lot of modern concert situations, especially the more corporate concert situations, there's the barrier. There's the four meaty dudes standing there with their arms folded, to stop you from engaging with the band. Yeah. Well, not engaging with them. Well, I mean, they're there to stop you from physically going up on the stage. Yeah. But it's that barrier is symbolic. Right. It's the difference between seeing a punk show in a basement and seeing a punk show at the Trocadero. Like, both are cool and both have their pros and cons, but like,
in the end, you got a barrier in between you and the band, and that's a divide, even if that barrier is just a couple of feet.
Yeah.
What else do you guys do to kind of break down the barrier between audience and musician?
We kind of also encourage a lot of like crowd participation things if people can do it, or even like throwing a cover in the set. I know that kind of draws away from there. It's like usually 20-25 minute sets. So
okay, so they don't have a ton of well, you got a 4-band bill right there, and you're trying to keep it fairly compact, trying to keep people there.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than going to a club and finding out the band you want to play is not going to be out for another 3 hours.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than being the band. There's nothing worse than being the band, showing up and finding out you're not going on for another 3 hours.
Surprise.
Well, no, but it seems like you guys are really trying to like. There's older models of playing, and there's older models of attending shows, and there's older models of playing shows and putting on shows. And it sounds like you guys at SoFar, and just in general, just sort of the new push right now is to sort of dismantle a lot of that. And I think that's great. I mean, do you guys kind of see yourself as sort of dismantling these sort of older hierarchical structures? I mean, not to get too intellectual on it, but like, I mean, there are higher. Anything that costs money has a hierarchical structure. Right. I can't say that. I need a different word than hierarchical. Yeah. Well, it has a power structure.
Yeah.
And if you guys subvert, and you guys by sort of subverting that power structure are making it more accessible to people, which I find incredibly admirable.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess since it's kind of a pay what you want situation too, that definitely helps. So even if you're strapped for cash, you can still kind of show up and enjoy yourself. It's not like you're getting that $20 ticketing charge for when you want to go to something else. Yeah. It's like, it's a $10 show. It's not that bad. No, wait.
No, it's not. I have, and as I talk to more and more bands, and I always have to be. I'm not careful, but like I never want someone in a band who's going to have a future opportunity to ever have to say anything publicly with me that like that would harm their chances of getting. You know, I was talking to Bruno from Former Bell, and we were talking about the Fillmore, and I was saying from my standpoint, I'm not wild about it, but from his standpoint, if I was in a band, like, and someone from that club said, "Hey, do you want to play here?" I absolutely would.
You're like, yeah, definitely,
of course. So I get the standard right there. Well, I'm curious. I'm curious what you guys think of commercial outlets seeming to get more into the small venue game right now.
Right.
And when I say you guys, I mean you. I don't mean for you to speak for all of SoFar. You are an independent person with a voice and a mind of your own, so you can have opinions. And as long as you're not inciting people to violence, like I think it's going to be okay.
I guess it's really comes down to the experience of everything. It's definitely completely different than going to a venue show. Obviously,
you guys are sort of recreating the indie house show circuit, but on a more organized. You have a more organized level. Like that's pretty much what it is. If a bunch of house shows all got together and created a ring throughout the country, or from city to city, that's essentially what you guys have done. I'm not to pigeonhole you, make you just be that thing, but that's more or less what you've done. You've taken DIY independent venues and added a bit of national organization to it, which is great.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like, what you guys think of, because it's true in anything artistic, there's always the vanguard. There's always that first wave of, you know, people like you guys at SoFar and people like you who do independent promotion and stuff like that, who are like really leading the call at the beginning. And then once you've led the call to a point that it appears profitable for somebody else, there's never a shortage of people to want to swoop in and even under the auspices of being helpful to you, say like, well, this is good. Well, let us put some of our money behind this and we can help you with this. And the next thing you know, that thing that you made isn't yours anymore.
Right.
I'm curious.
Makes sense, yeah.
I'm curious what you think about that.
I guess that's definitely kind of something that has crossed our minds before, of if someone else is going to just try and piggyback on the idea, which obviously like house shows isn't a new thing.
No.
But I think it's really the global network that we have behind it that appeals to a lot of people. that idea that, oh, I've experienced this in one city. I'm going on vacation to like, I don't know, like Seattle next week, and like, oh, there's a show there, then like that'd be cool to do. Like little things like that, I think. And then we kind of keep it fresh too with, we've been starting doing like SoFar tours. So kind of having like some of the same group of artists doing like multiple cities.
Oh, they'll go to multiple SoFar cities and
Yeah.
do multiple SoFar shows.
Yeah.
That's cool. You've created, and again, like in the like the classic DIY punk era and like college rock era of the 80s and 90s, you guys have sort of recreated that that structure right there. Of course, it's a lot faster, and the organization works a lot faster because we have the internet now. And before, it was all zines and people literally making phone calls and sending letters to each other. Now,
Right.
at least the response can be a lot more instant. Are you finding that that's definitely a huge help?
Yeah, definitely. Everyone's just super, like on the SoFar team at least, everyone's super supportive of each other. So even if we have band suggestions and stuff, or if we want to get advice for like a band that we had in another city, like everyone's super helpful with that coming through. So it's just kind of creating this whole network too of people that's supportive of each other and everything. So it's really cool.
How do you guys pick bands?
I mostly do all the booking for us here in Philly. So it's kind of a combination of just word of mouth stuff or anyone that I've been into. I get a ton of emails, obviously. We have like a little listening team. So we go through every now and then and kind of pick out some band submissions that we really dig. Obviously, anyone touring through. So it's just kind of a combination of a lot of different things. So
you find do you get a lot of, solicited or unsolicited? You get a lot of bands kind of on your desk at any given times. How do you deal with because it's a lot of material being pushed to you, and everyone's got a story, and everybody wants to play a show when they, either if they're on tour or if they're here in Philadelphia. You know, these people obviously contact you because they want to play a show. What are you looking for? And I don't even just mean genre wise or style, but I mean, obviously there are certain things about bands that speak to us that make us zero in on one band and not another. That's just how we operate as humans.
I guess in a way there's like that advantage to, with the SoFar, I try to book varying genres. We even have like spoken word acts and stuff too.
Oh, cool.
So, really anything, I don't know, it's hard to say like just picking anything different that's going to stand out, but obviously there's just the factor too of being able to strip it down or being acoustic.
Yeah.
Which isn't a necessity, but there's some people that kind of are really interested in that idea too, and being able to strip their stuff down and trying something different. And then having that for people to work off of. So
it presents a challenge to a band too, where they can go, especially when you're out on the road and you're playing kind of the stuff the same way. You're playing in clubs every night, and the sound is crappy and it's loud, and it's fun to be able to just go into a room with people who are paying attention and being able to just sort of turn your stuff on its head for a night. Yeah, really cool stuff can happen. Right then too, and I'm sure the audience gets that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, there's definitely been times too where I guess the artists come in a lot of the times really not expecting anything that much different, or really not knowing what to expect in general, and then just walking out of the experience just being like,
oh, that's
that was
great.
Awesome.
So like now there's the audience walk out being like, wow, that was awesome. But like even the band walking out being like, wow, we did not expect that to be. You guys just got them through like another week of tour right there, just spiritually.
Yeah. I think they come in usually thinking like, oh, it's a house show, like we're going to play music and people maybe be chatty through it. But when it's like a completely silent room of maybe like 40 or 50 people, it's
that's great. I'll take 40 or 50 listening people over 100 people not listening in a club.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the preferred thing for people. So it's cool.
Mm-hmm. You manage bands too.
Yeah.
Because you sent me a very cool list of bands. Actually, I ran into Sunflights.
Oh, nice.
They were playing at the farm food show
really?
yesterday.
Nice.
And I would have gone up and talked to them, but they were playing, and it didn't seem like the moment. But like I walked by them, I saw the two girls, and I heard them because I've been listening to some of their stuff through the link that you sent me, and I walked by and like I kind of looked at them. I was like, I know what that is, and then and then at my age too, my next question is, why do I know what that is? What's wrong with them? I was like, what did I do? Why do I know what the new thing? Why do I know what that thing is?
Does it just sound like someone I know? Or
Yeah, I know. And then I walked up and I saw the records like that they said. I was like, oh, I know them, and I wanted to tell them. I'm like, I'm gonna have you on my show, but you don't know that yet. It would have been a very awkward conversation, made even more awkward by the fact that they were performing at the same time. Well, I really enjoy them. I really I liked all the artists that you sent me. And it turns out I do know Josh.
Nice.
Through
multiple people.
yeah, through Bruno and other people. It's not a big city. Like despite the fact that like there are so many more bands, and there are so many more bands that I'm even like. When I was in my later 20s, I was actually a lot more familiar. But even as now, I find I still kind of know. I still seem to know the people who are worth knowing, and I don't mean that in an opportunistic way. I mean that like people who are making good art. Like I still seem to know the people who are making good stuff.
Right.
So
that's good.
I don't know. I have no secret for that. I just
I guess it's like I feel like those people obviously do a really good job at just putting themselves out there too. So
yeah. Because while it is easier to put yourself out there, there's still everyone else is doing it too. So I don't think it's any easier now than it has been before.
Right.
You have to make yourself heard even more distinctly above the clamor of everyone. Because let's face it, everybody's got a band.
Yeah.
That's always my thing. Whenever I meet someone that's like, oh, you should meet my friend. He's got a band. Like I have to bite back the ears to just roll my eyes and be like, oh, do they have a show this weekend? Do you need me to go to it? Which is terrible.
It's ironic. I also know someone else who's also in a band.
It's like, interesting. I also, yes, this is a thing to do.
So rare.
Yeah. I mean, I try not to think like that because, I mean, you know, I was at some point just trying to get people to pay attention to my band. Everyone at some point or another is trying to get someone to pay attention to their band. I just think that there are a whole lot of other ways to do it.
Yeah.
That aren't necessarily getting explored all the time. But to you in managing bands, if everyone seems to have a band now, like what's the approach when you deal with artists? I mean, you seem to only be dealing with a few artists. And these are people you probably know personally or have developed personal relationships with, which probably makes it a lot both easier and harder.
Yeah. It's true, yeah. I guess I've been working with like Josh and Matt, who are two Philly acts, and then another Matt down in North Carolina and a band in Nashville called The Middle Ground. And those two, ironically, the ones out of state are ones I kind of met doing. I used to do college booking stuff too, so I kind of met them through all that. But yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of weird how everything's just panned out in that way. So I kind of just started with like one band, not really knowing what else would happen. And
who
then,
was
like,
the first band that you were working with?
The first artist I worked with,
or the first artist where you were taking on a more management capacity. Otherwise, besides just booking like a show or two, like being like, I'm gonna really help you guys over the long haul type of thing.
Yeah, it was. I started working with The Middle Ground almost a year ago now. So they were kind of my first band that I started with. So we just kind of kept in touch over like a year or two of knowing each other, and they happened to be looking for a manager at the same time. I kind of was trying to freelance in that more. So we just kind of started working together, and it's been pretty well ever since. So they're getting ready they just finished up their album, so it's kind of working on that whole what to do next kind of thing. So where did you
learn to do that? Or I imagine you're still learning to do it as you're doing
the management aspect, you mean?
Yeah. Where was the class in college where they told you exactly how to deal with an indie band?
That I learned all on my own. I mean, I'm lucky enough that everyone I work with is pretty chill and easy to work with. No one really has any egos, which I think is like a huge thing for me.
Well, what about expectation? Like, what's the for The Middle Ground? What's their expectation of you? And then vice versa, what's your expectation of them? Because that's management and band is a two-way street.
Yeah, it's kind of honestly like dabbling in a bit of everything. So I kind of help them with a lot of booking stuff and PR right now because it's only like our small team. So
do you have a management team? Is it just you, or do you have people that you work with too?
Myself and another girl here in Philly, Brianna, who helps me with some booking stuff. It's kind of like been the two of us doing stuff, but for the most part, it's just me with the management end. So it's kind of finding out what roles I need to fill, and kind of making sure people are doing stuff and not sitting around and getting as much exposure as possible.
You got to crack the whip on the band sometimes too, and just be like, "Get out there, guys! I ain't doing it for you."
Yeah,
and that seems to very much be a management style and a management relationship, at least for a lot of bands at a certain level. Right. I think the days of like, a guy in a bad suit with a cigar who's like gonna make you number one, kid. Like that's long gone. Like the idea of number one isn't even a thing anymore. It's so much more subjective than it ever was. It can be number one in so many ways now, as opposed to just like on the radio or something like that.
Yeah.
That's not even really that's not I won't say that's not a thing anymore, but that's not as much of a thing anymore.
It's definitely, I think I was having this conversation with someone else the other week of kind of, there's no real guidelines anymore of how to do anything. So really it's kind of testing out whatever you want in a way. Like some stuff kind of randomly takes off that you don't think will. And
what are you finding that's working really well that you wouldn't have thought would have worked until you just gave it a shot? You don't have to give up all your secrets. Well, they're not really secrets. What works for one person, like, could in no way work what works for one band could in no way work for any other band.
Yeah. Honestly, just kind of reaching out to everyone possible, whether you think you're going to get a no, yes, or no reply. I think that's like the huge thing. A lot of people are just like, I don't know if I'm even going to try for that because that's probably going to be a no.
Yeah.
It's kind of, and I guess kind of my aspect with things too, of just trying for it and seeing what happens.
Yeah. So you find that you're not like it doesn't scare you, the idea that you could ask 50 people to help you out and only 2 of them are actually going to do it.
Yeah.
See, that's great. I think that the other way can cripple a lot of bands right there because they think like, oh, we don't punch at that level. We don't work at that level.
Yeah.
We can't possibly ask these people for that. When really, we were talking about Avi before.
Yeah.
I was just talking about this with Avi, that you never know who's going to say yes.
Exactly, yeah.
Until you ask them. And I found that true with producers, and I found that true with artists. I found that true getting people on this show.
Yeah.
Like people who I didn't think, like I had Joe from Hopalong on last summer.
Nice.
I didn't think he would say yes. Like to me, in my mind, a guy like him, I'm like, he's a dude with a studio and he's important and he plays in, at the time, 2 awesome bands. Like, why would he do my show? But boom, he did it. Like, and that kind of, it was kind of eye-opening to me. And at the end, we're all people. But like, it was kind of eye-opening to me. It's just like, you just ask. And the worst thing someone's going to say is like, no, I don't think I really have time for that right now.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, okay.
Yeah. If anything, too, it kind of opens it up to sometimes constructive criticism and whatnot, too.
Yeah. How do you mean? Like when, like, if you go to pitch something to someone and they say, I'm not interested, but here, let me tell you why I'm not. Or like, let me tell you what you would need to do. Yeah,
sometimes you get those rare people that'll say, like, I dig this, but, like, maybe change this or something like that.
Like change stuff about the bands or change stuff about your approach to pitching the bands?
A little bit of both sometimes, but yeah, I guess it just comes down to everyone's interested in different things, so.
And again, you're never going to know until you ask.
Exactly.
I said I was interested in a certain band that you had on, and I said the thing that interested me the most was that they were female.
Yeah.
Because as I said it becomes this very, not a macho so much anymore, but it's just a very masculine boys club. And the rock music world is always going to be like that. It doesn't have to be, but that is what it is right now. This always gets weird. And not in a, it's just, I'm just going to put it out there and see what happens. When I have other ladies on the show, the first thing you always want to ask them is like, well, what's it like being a woman in the music world? Which is like asking, like, what's it like being a space alien in the music world? It's just like, well, it's a lot like being a person.
Yeah.
But you have a management company, or you have a management group, and you have it with another girl.
Yeah.
Do you find that there's still that old misogynistic viewpoint in the music world who are not going to take you guys seriously simply because you're young women in a scene that has more young women now than I think it ever has, but still doesn't really have that many.
Yeah. I think definitely there are some drawbacks to it at times.
Mm-hmm.
You're not considered as highly, I guess. That I don't know. I feel like sometimes I'm usually not taken as seriously as I could be.
Yeah.
Because obviously I've been doing this a while, so for the most part, I feel like I know what's going on as much as someone else is.
Do you think that's because you're young, or because you're a woman, or probably a combination of both?
Probably a combination of both. But yeah, even it's just some places, it's like when it's all men working in one office, it's like you got to wonder when only other guys who manage bands are getting opportunities. Like sometimes you got to wonder if it's like who you're working with, or if it's you as a person, or like what the deal is.
you question it, like, am I actually any good at this, or or is this just another wall that needs to be broken through at one point or another? Yeah,
even the little things like that with management, even like outside of that with like the music photography stuff I do, I think it's still a very like male driven field in a way too. Because a lot of the like paid photography things seem to only go to like male photographers. And a group of us started like a photo collective that's called the Photo Ladies. It's kind of just a group of women from really kind of like all over the globe now. It's kind of taken off. But we kind of like bounce back ideas and are really like supportive of getting each other off the ground and stuff.
Yeah.
So
you support each other, feed each other gigs when you can, things like that. Oh, that's great. Definitely. That's great. It's great and also unfortunate that you have to form your own circle to do it. But
and then we can also vent about the times when we're shooting and then get shoved out of the way by men who think they're better than us. So.
Do you think that's? And it's funny, you mentioned Last Shadow Puppets right at the beginning. Did you read that article that came out? Was it in Spin?
I'm pretty sure it was a Spinner Girl.
A month ago.
Yeah.
Aside from what you feel about the band, or and it didn't even seem like the majority of the criticism was against the member of Arctic Monkeys. It seemed
Miles Kane.
It seemed to be the other guy in the band.
Yeah, Miles Kane. Yeah.
When you read stuff like that, I mean, for me, it pisses me off just as a thinking person. Yeah. But like, I'm curious, as a woman in the arts and then in rock music, like, I'm curious what your take is on that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, I don't know if I want to call it a stereotype too, of just kind of the idea that like, oh, she's only working here so she can like sleep with the bands and stuff like that. And it's like, that's not really what we're in for. We're invested in the music as much as anyone else is. You guys
started as fans like everyone else did.
Yeah. And then it's like kind of, it's weird how it's not looked at in the other way too. Like and there's other things that have been popping up too. I'm blanking on like the artist that did it, but I think it was like her PR guy who like sexually assaulted her.
No, it was again. I can't remember. I can't remember the names of these guys, mostly because I don't want their presence to take up room in my brain. But no, I know who you're talking about. The gentleman who ran the. Why am I calling him a gentleman? Why am I trying to like soft the piece of crap who ran a PR firm for indie bands, and it seemed like everything from full on attempted sexual assault to just run-of-the-mill sexual harassment. As sad as it is, that sexual harassment can be run-of-the-mill at this point. But and that has come out. That kind of stuff has come out a lot more, I think, over the last year. But I don't think it's because suddenly it's happening over the last year. I just think a lot of publications are finally taking away that sort of veil of silence right there. I thought that the article that woman wrote for Spin was excellent. I thought the fact that she even included the letter that Miles Kane wrote to her afterwards and that wasn't a bad letter. He didn't that wasn't a crappy letter he wrote to her. He was like, I'm sorry. Like I shouldn't have behaved like that. I shouldn't have talked to you like that.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really great side of that story, because a lot of people, when that does happen, they say like, oh, well, what if he didn't mean it? It's like, well,
he has that weird kind of,
and it's not a black and
sense
white
of humor too, but
it's not a black and white thing either. And but the one thing we always learn in those situations is that it has nothing to do with his intention and everything to do with the way that it's taken.
Yeah.
And that just because you're out there saying those things, you can't decide how people get to take it. And it just seemed completely inappropriate from start to finish.
Yeah, definitely.
Not to besmirch a band that you had so much fun seeing last night. I'm really not trying to do that.
Yeah, that was like definitely a debate going into the show too, which I was having that conversation too with people.
The debate of,
I guess, kind of like, have they had a lack of like press coverage because of that incident? And kind of like, do we even shoot this guy? Because
But I mean, I think that is a legitimate debate to have right there.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in a band, and a band's job is to present itself in the most idealized way possible.
Right.
And of course, that runs a whole gamut of things right there. But if they present themselves accidentally or on purpose in a way that a lot of people would find distasteful, then, like, I don't know, I feel like you have to deal with that. Like, not you, but as a band, you have to deal with that. You'd be like, all right, we've got one guy. I mean, in Queens of the Stone Age, Nick Oliveri got fired from that band for various misconduct in his private life.
Yeah.
That had nothing to do with his ability to play bass for the band Queens of the Stone Age. But they decided as a band that, we're not going to have this guy in the band right now if he's going to be like this.
Yeah.
I think that takes a tremendous amount of courage and foresight in a band to say, like, it doesn't matter that this is the band and we're the guys.
Yeah, everyone's just gonna look at that one dude as like.
I mean, and in the end, everything was fine, right? Like,
yeah.
Well, you said you didn't have much contact with them personally, other than taking pictures of them.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder if they didn't do the portraits because it was a female photographer.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to set you off on it. Yeah, if someone said like, maybe not have her back here, right, with the thing that happened before. Like, let's just avoid this situation. Let's just avoid this situation. Well, I mean, it's smart. It's like, let's avoid the situation entirely.
Yeah. I also like. I guess there was the other thing that was going around too, that they just kind of, after that too, they kind of stopped doing kind of portraits, or like their interviews became a lot more selective. So
yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. That's exhausting too, to try and approach a band, especially after a show or even amidst tour, because you're playing every night and you're moving every night. You're going from place to place. You're either on a plane or on a bus or something like that.
Right.
And you get bored and you get punchy because you really only have like 60 minutes of activity in a day, and everything else is either getting to it or coming down from it.
Yeah.
It's a whole other
and having
world.
to answer those same exact interview questions.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Day after day.
Exactly. And at some point you want to, I mean, Dylan did it in the 60s where he would just turn it all on and said the Beatles did it, where they would just, reply with like just nonsense and things like that. And sometimes it feels like the bands are having an antagonistic relationship with the press, but in the end it's just like, I think the press owes musicians a little more forethought.
Yeah.
And I think musicians just got to chill out. These guys are trying to do their jobs, and nowadays, I mean, this from writing freelance and doing freelance photography stuff like that. The drive to create content is more and more and more. You're responsible. You as a photographer, you as a music writer, are responsible for more and more and more.
Right. Yeah.
And in the end, it can only take up so much room in your brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like the frustrating part too is like when you go through all that too, and you take time to make up interview questions and all that, and then it like doesn't even get shared or anything. Mm-hmm. So it's like I spend like 2 hours typing this up. Yeah. And like coming up with everything, and
trying to ask different questions and trying to like really,
which I especially try to do because I know like I get bored too of like that same, because I'll like look into a lot of past interviews before I do one, just to be like, what have they gotten asked the most? And,
I do that too.
Yeah.
When I have people on who've appeared in interviews, you print. If they've been on other podcasts, I'll try and listen to it just to be like, all right, not only what don't I ask them about, or like, hey, what do I ask them about that seem to have set off like a good little run right there. I get it. I'm with you.
Yeah.
You want to ask good questions. On the other hand, you want to ask questions that possibly other people would want to know the answers to. I'm a big gearhead. So like, obviously when I talk to bands, the first thing I want to talk about is like technical things about guitars or, you know, stuff like that. But I realized that very few people are interested in that. There are whole publications devoted entirely to that. Right. And that I don't need to do that. What do you find the most rewarding thing about doing all of it so far? And not just so far, but like promoting your own bands, kind of, you know, creating your own plans for bands and for music and seeing them through. What do you get out of this?
I honestly kind of just thrive off of seeing like the end product in a way. Like I really like seeing people succeed in the end, like whether it be like the SoFar show where people walk away and like are really into all the bands that played and like become new fans and like supportive people, or even just doing like booking tour runs for people and doing press out of that and having some good content come out of that. It's always exciting when things actually happen for people. So I think that's as much of a, I don't know if gamble's the right thing I want to say, but
I think gamble because you're going to put you're going to put a lot of time into it. You're going to put a lot of effort. And I imagine that, like me, this is not what you do for a living. Like, this is not how you pay the rent.
No.
There's that whole other side of life right there. So that when you do spend, I guess what they call your free time or your leisure time, whatever you want to call it now, doing these other things for not that much material reward, you got to make darn sure that you're getting something out of it. It has to be fun.
Yeah.
And if it isn't fun, then it's called work.
Yeah.
I always said that. In fact, when I left my band, I said this was fun up to a point, but now it's not fun. And I already have that. And that's called going to work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's important to get that satisfaction out of doing what you do. And I'm glad that you do.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the bands get satisfaction. Everyone's happy working together because everyone's working for a common goal.
Yeah. As far as I know, everyone's happy. So that's good.
You would hope they would tell you. Yeah. You would hope they would tell you. Have you ever found that where you're working with people and you think it's going well and then you find out later that it is not going well at all?
There was like the very first artist I worked with, it was kind of like going in that direction. But it was kind of like I was putting a lot of, I don't know if like behind the scenes effort in that didn't really amount to anything. And despite sending out like 500 emails and like not hearing anything back, you know, it's not like I didn't do anything. I was trying as hard as I could. So
it's all about expectation too.
Yeah.
The band's got to hold up their end of it as well.
Yeah.
You don't have to use names.
No, I'll keep it on the DL.
No, I get that too, and that's part of the learning curve in the beginning too. And it could have been a whole host of things. It could have been the band. It could have been you. It was probably a combination of the two.
I'll take some. Credit.
I'll credit, blame, whatever
blame.
You want to call it.
That's more so what I was going for.
Cool. So anyone can go on to, was it just SoFar.com?
Yeah, SoFar Sound. If you want Philly specific, it's sofarsounds.com/Philadelphia. But
there's a little
I think
thing
the
up in the
site's
top.
kind of
The site's very user friendly.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like geo-tagged or whatever. So wherever you sign in from, it should tell you your local cities and whatnot. So
anything coming up in SoFar? Obviously, you can't tell us who, but you can tell us that there are things coming up.
Yes, we obviously have like one show a month, so. Our May one should be around, I think, the 21st. So I'm currently booking that this week. So.
Gotcha. So people can go to SoFar Sounds and get in the know.
Yeah.
Cool. Carolyn, thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right.
We'll be together till the end of time. 25 Well,
that's the show for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Carolyn Lederach, for being on the show. It's really great to talk to people who are in charge of the nuts and bolts, the logistics, the background stuff, like all the things that make a scene what it is. It's more than just artists. You couldn't do it without the artists, but then, of course, you couldn't do it without the people who are helping the artists, who are doing the business stuff, taking the pictures, writing the articles, going on tour with them. All those things. It all goes hand in hand. No one can happen without the other. I feel like I've hammered that point home enough at this point. Thank you, Carolyn, for being on the show. Like I said, go to SoFarSounds.com. Pick your city. In Philadelphia, May 21st and May 28th are the May SoFar shows. Go to the website. You just sign up on the mailing list. It doesn't cost you any money. All they get is your email, and then they'll tell you when the shows are. You can sign up for them and go and check out a really, truly unique and amazing concert experience. Way different than going and seeing a band in a club or a bar or a big concert hall or an arena or a stadium. It's a totally different way to see music, and if you're a music fan and a live music fan, I highly recommend you check it out. SoFarSounds.com. Check out Carolyn on Twitter, CLED1024. Check out her management company, Blue Stock Agency, at Blue Stock Agency on Twitter as well. All that stuff is there. And, of course, go to 25o'clockpod.com. Old episodes, new episodes, mailing list, friends and neighbors, all kinds of stuff. Hey, resubscribe to the show on your aggregate of choice, be it iTunes, Google Play, or any of the other things. Like I said, I switched hosts, so you might have to do that to keep getting the show. Whew. Go to brookladelphiamusic.com. I wrote an article. It's there. RadioNowhere903.com. They rebroadcast the show often. That's a lot of stuff. I told you all at the top. I'll tell you again. Anyway, that's going to do it for this time. My name is Dan Drago. This is 25 o'clock. Until next time, take care.